What's up, comic book fans? Pete here from Comic Books Transformed, where me and my friend Mike Bongiorno over there will talk about Doctor Who. Mike's not the usual co-host, but I always thoroughly enjoy having him on the show. So, Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Yeah, same here. And you know what? Tell people about what show they can find you on. Let's get that going right away because I want them to listen to your show because your show is awesome.
My podcast is called Pop Culture Man Children. PCMC is what the kids on the street call it. And it is a fandom podcast. It is a podcast about media and media ephemera. So there's a lot of episodes on movies, a lot of episodes on video games, on TV shows, on books, on comics. But then there's list episodes where we talk about our top five top 10 best jump scares. We did that a few Halloweens ago. I think my number one was The Exorcist 3. We did recently our top 10 character actors. It's all sorts of fun stuff, and we come from a point of view of non-toxic fandom.
That's fantastic. Yeah. You know, you always mention that when you do a plug on here. And I was thinking on your show, what percentage of your discussions do you think you devote to people's reactions or like the public reactions or social media reactions to what you're discussing?
That's a great question. I think it depends on the text that we're looking at. And if I have an axe to grind, if I like something that other people don't like, I'll make a bigger deal out of that. Or if something I like was review bombed. If I don't like something that other people do like, I try not to belabor that because it's, for in the sake of being non-toxic. Famously, well, I don't know if it's famous, but I've talked about it a lot of times in my show. I saw the first showing on the first day the movie Shrek came out, and I walked out of it. And I thought, wow, what a bad movie. I can't wait for this movie to fail. And here we are, like 30 years later.
Yeah.
I guess I was wrong.
Wow. Okay. Shrek. Yeah. I understand not liking it. Yeah, I mean, at this point, yeah, there's like 4 movies. There's like spin-offs and stuff. It's funny, though, because that's just one fandom, and you don't really hear a lot about it because it's sort of like a kid's movie. But the stuff that we talk about, you and I, on this channel and on your channel, too, it's stuff that it was made for kids initially.
Yeah.
And then it's like grown into where like adults will sometimes make it their whole part of their identity.
Yes.
And then there's
not us though.
Oh no, of course not. Yeah. But then like there becomes this like argument over, well, who has the right to control the type of story that's being made with this?
Yeah, I think
franchise.
It's the ownership argument. The ownership is the thing that gets me. I'm a big proponent in post-structural criticism, and that the reader, and any particular reader, is the important element in understanding the meaning of a text. If that's like if somebody says I don't like something and they have a valid reason that isn't like stupid or racist or whatever, I'll go, okay, I can see that you met it on some level that I didn't meet it on.
Right.
It's the ownership thing. It's the thing that a lot of guys our age, I think that's why I do belabor the point about non-toxic, because I feel like a lot of people our age in our demographic feel as though because they were children when things came out, they own them.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's true. Nobody owns these things.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking about the franchises that have these divided fan bases, that there's just always this social media backlash. It seems like it's Star Wars. That's the main one. Then there's sort of like both comic book, the main publishers, DC and Marvel.
Yeah.
Doctor Who is on there as well, even though it's not as widely known. And then like maybe the smaller things like Ninja Turtles and like Power Rangers and stuff like that. But really, Ghostbusters, right? Like everything that we enjoyed as kids, right? But then when it comes to like, because we've had you on the show, and last week we just talked about the Acolyte. And Brian and I are covering the Acolyte on this channel too. Like, it just seems like in general that these shows aren't watched for like their merit anymore of like, is it a good show? Did they tell the story effectively? And it just becomes who's casting it, what's the message that they're trying to get across, and then do you either agree with the message or are you gonna like yell about the message?
Right. Well, I think I won't say everything's political now because, in fact, everything is political always.
Right.
Now all of our conversations are dictated by the polarity of our political landscape. I think one of the things the internet can do is it can be an incubator for radicalization.
Oh yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean something serious like terrorism. It could be something as simple as, hating one of these things that we just talked about, or hating Kathleen Kennedy.
Right.
Well, like if you Google Kathleen Kennedy, right, you don't get she produced E.T., she produced all these great things that she did. You get probably the first page you'll get, especially if you go on YouTube and you put her name in, you'll get tons and tons and tons of these weird think pieces about how she ruined things and how she's awful.
Right.
And fake news about how she's about to be fired or she's like not the real head. She's a proxy head. And that's where I think the political nature things is. I try to stay out of it by not pretending to like things I don't just to be on the right side of it. Like people don't like The Acolyte for a lot of reasons. And one of them is that it has an African-American lead and that it has, I guess more queerness in it. I guess the two mothers. I'm not going to pretend like I like The Acolyte to defend that. I do think that that's ridiculous and stupid, but my reasons for not liking The Acolyte are just regular critical reasons, like not thinking it's well written or well executed.
Right. Really excellent points. And I think we're kind of itching to talk about The Acolyte together right now too. But to bring it back to Doctor Who, have you looked at the social media response to these last two episodes that we're going to cover?
No. I have I like maybe this is wrong of me, but I do like a lot of my social media, particularly. I actually like an echo chamber. I know it's an echo chamber, but I don't want to be surrounded by things I hate because I think that there's a such thing as like hate porn.
Yes. Right? Oh, absolutely.
Where like you get your blood going and you get mad and you get upset and then maybe you start a war on the comments. Maybe you just feel about it. And to me, that is such a waste of time. So I try not to do it. So I really didn't see a lot of negative things.
Yeah. For Doctor Who for this whole season, I'm in an echo chamber as well, which is funny because we covered that episode Dot and Bubble. But I would see basically when you're in the echo chamber, you see someone that you like who has the same views as you takes a snapshot of like a thumbnail where someone's railing about the thing you love. And they're like, look, they don't get it. Or like, look what this asshole put. And so that's how I get a view into the other side.
Right.
And with the other side, it's often about like how like the Doctor's always crying in this season. How like maybe like a metaphor in a certain episode is too much. There's often talk about how the ratings are really low for this season.
That's been true for a long time now.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's worse now. I mean, it was bad during the Jodie Whittaker. It was bad during the Peter Capaldi days.
Yeah.
I don't think they've ever been as high as they were during the Matt Smith era.
Right. Was the Matt Smith era like the pinnacle? Like, was it even more than David Tennant?
I think Matt Smith was really, really popular.
Yeah.
And he was also popular with demographics that they had never been popular with because I think a lot of young people thought he was hot.
Yeah. So, okay. So like, that's kind of the negative stuff I see. But then for these particular last two episodes, I did see a lot about how people felt like the payoff and like the things that we were leading to the whole season didn't pay off. And so I think that like we should now go into the meat and potatoes of these episodes and talk about like what that looks like. So I got this one ticker going across the bottom here. We're talking about the second to last episode, which is called The Legend of Ruby Rose, right?
Ruby Sunday.
Ruby Sunday. Jesus Christ, I'm mixing them up. But maybe the reason why I'm saying Rose is because, like, right away the Doctor brings Ruby to unit headquarters, and we see a whole bunch of characters there. And essentially, like, what they do now in Doctor Who, and maybe this is always the case, but it's like, oh, we know these people; they're going to be a member of unit now, right?
Right. Donna's daughter is a member of unit.
Right. Now, there was a woman that was in a wheelchair in one of the specials. I think maybe she was actually in two of the specials. And the wheelchair had machine guns on it. And then, like, she's not there anymore. I don't think she died.
She's not there. I don't remember what happened to her, but you're right. She's not there. She seems to be replaced by this, like, kid, this 13-year-old kid.
Right.
What's his name? Morris Gibbons.
Right. So that kid's there. There's like this one like soldier guy he's like this attractive tall soldier guy.
Yeah, he salutes the TARDIS when it comes in.
Right. And then we have, like you said, Donna Noble's daughter too. And then we have Kate, who's the Brigadier's daughter. And then there's this.
Although I think she may have been a companion longer than the Brigadier at this point.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
A companion for a long time.
Yeah. And she's kind of risen up in the ranks in unit too, right?
I think where
she's like the Nick Fury of unit now.
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
So, they're all with these unit people, and basically the Doctor wants to know what the hell is going on with Susan Twist, because he and Ruby have figured out that, this Susan or this woman just keeps appearing wherever they travel to.
Right.
And so then we finally get introduced to this Susan Triad, who the Doctor starts assuming that this Susan is his granddaughter, Susan.
Right.
So I really, ever since I watched this episode, like it's like 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point, I wanted to know what you thought of Susan Triad as a character.
As a character, I mean, I thought she was interesting. I liked that she wasn't a mustache twirling villain.
Yes. Agreed.
I like the idea that all of the Susans, and it gets confusing because the actress is also named Susan.
Right.
All of the Susans throughout time are actual people. At least they say that at some point in the show. So, like, they have memories and they are real people, even though they were like sleeper cells for Sutekh.
Right.
I thought she was interesting. Doctor Who, I think, is a show. It's progressive in a lot of ways, but I think it's not ageist, because you also have Mel, who was, I think, the 5th Doctor's companion.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And you have Mel in both these episodes too.
And I think she does a great job. One thing I want to give credit to is I always watch Who Culture, and they give their ups and downs for every Doctor Who episode after I watch it. And one of the points that they brought up, I'm actually going to probably quote a few of their points here, but they felt like Mel was kind of underused in these 2 episodes, that like she's just kind of like this add along to the Doctor and Ruby in the next one. Right. But they had that kind of like zombie sequence where a person realizes they're infected, but the other survivors don't. So I really like that. We can get into that when we talk about that next episode. But all the unit people, they're all gathered around, and I kind of had this feeling of like, oh, are we going to have like some red shirt people and they're all going to die? And then the spoiler for the next episode is everybody dies, right?
Yeah, it's a real Marvel Endgame.
Yeah.
When Kate died, I had a reaction because I like the character Kate, and she's been on the show for a long, long time. I was like, oh my God, what narrative stakes. But then Ruby's mother died, and then this woman died, and then everyone died, and you get to a point where you go, oh, then they're just going to reverse it.
Yeah,
he's just going to figure out a way to reverse it and bring everybody back.
Right.
If it was just Kate, I would have been like, oh, you know what I mean? But she was the first one to die that you care about.
Right.
So you're like, oh, wow, this is really going there. No.
Yeah. I actually had the exact same reaction where I was like, okay, once Ruby's mom dies, I'm like, okay, all right, the reset button, right? So here's the thing, though, Mike, is that like with these 2 episodes, I feel like for this whole season, I've understood everything that's happened, with maybe the exception of 73 yards. I was like a little bit confused with that one. Yeah. But with this one, I was kind of confused about the setup. They have this thing called the time window, which I really like the setup for that, where like Kate says to the doctor when he asks her, "Where's your time travel tech?" And she's like, "You've always told us not to mess with time travel." He's like, "Where's your time window?" And she's like, "It's on level 10." Right?
Yeah.
Like I love that little interaction. But then that whole sequence, I didn't really understand like what happened. I know the intent of what they were trying to do. They were trying to like recreate that scene so they could like get a glimpse of Ruby's mother, her biological mother. But I don't really know what happened. Can you explain it to me? I'm stupid.
No. Well, you're not stupid. Look, one of the weaknesses of both these two episodes and a lot of Doctor Who is that they'll throw out a very big idea and it won't totally fit. You know what I mean? Like imagine a living room and you decide you get like a giant TV and you're like, this is such a great TV and it doesn't really fit. The couch doesn't fit anymore. And basically you just shove it in. And that's what happens with these big ideas.
Yeah.
So what you do on the periphery narratively is you do a lot of what they call hand waving.
Right, exactly.
You just say something. There's a lot of and I should come out and say I'm not a fan of these two episodes. I think these two episodes were weak. I think that it started off kind of weak and then had a really strong middle this season, the whole season, and then ended kind of weak. And we can get into that later as to these types of endings.
Sure.
But there's in these two episodes particularly, there's a lot of rhetorical nonsense. Like something sounds good, so they think it makes sense. Like time, memory is time, so time is memory, and memory is a time machine.
Yeah.
So then the time machine that they remember becomes the real time machine. Okay. Or, I mean, skipping all the way ahead to this because it's bothering me. Skipping all the way ahead to the end of the next episode.
Yep.
The very sad conclusion is Sutekh is death. So you can use death to kill death. Death of death means life. And that's just language. That's just rhetorical nonsense.
Right.
It's such an unsatisfying ending.
Right.
To all of this lead up. I was so bummed after watching episode 8. I was like, damn. You know, I mean, I like this season. I like this Doctor, but these two episodes, I think, were really had a lot of glaring problems in them. And like you said, you know, it's one thing if it's a fun ride, right?
Yeah.
Because then you could go, whatever, I'm having a fun ride. It's Doctor Who. Don't think about it too much.
Right.
But as you just said, you were kind of saying, what's going on with the time window? Once that starts happening and you're kind of lost a little bit, you're not having that fun.
Right, exactly. And like, besides the confusion of what's happening, you also get this effect. Like, I just watched The Village from 2004, right? And so I'm going to review it with Danny. Or, I'm sorry, I'm experiencing a time loop right now. I did review it with Danny this morning. It's been a long day, but I was telling Danny that I felt like Shyamalan in that movie is like trying to hit certain points. And so they do things that don't feel organic or real to hit those points. And I feel like in a story, like when you look back on something in the moment, if you like the characters, if you like the acting, the way that the scene is filmed, the music, you get kind of swept up into it, just like you just said. But then when you look back on it in hindsight, you know, it's kind of like, you know, waking up next to someone in bed and you're like, oh, I did that last night, you know. Then you get this like Doctor Who walk of shame experience, and you know, you look back and you're like, okay, I get what they were trying to do. There's certain like beats they want to hit,
right.
But I feel like what they put in place for this whole season, it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It makes no sense, Pete. It makes no sense. The plan makes no sense.
Yeah,
it just makes no sense. Everywhere that the Doctor, Sutekh attaches himself to the TARDIS. Don't think about that too long,
right?
Because it will make no sense. Because you'll go, wait, didn't Matt Smith's TARDIS explode and reset? Never mind that.
Yeah.
Just say, all right, Sutekh's been on the TARDIS since that episode with the Fourth Doctor,
right?
And everywhere he goes, he leaves a Susan. who's an older woman, but doesn't have to be because it's not his granddaughter, but it's supposed to be fooling him into thinking it's his granddaughter because her name is Susan. Except why would he do that?
Right.
Like, why would you call attention to your plan? There's no, like, for us, it makes sense because, like, he fooled us, the audience, but why would Sutek do that to the doctor?
Right.
Just leave a sleeper cell agent everywhere the TARDIS lands in time and space, and then one day, for whatever reason, you say now's the time, and then they all turn and kill all of life.
Right.
Why do you need Susan? Why do you need to tip the doctor off at all? It makes no sense at all.
Yes. Okay. Good. I'm glad we're on the same page as that. And then, like, to me, okay, so we get a reveal of who Ruby's actual biological mother is, and that's a whole nother thing I have complaints about too. We'll get to that in a minute. But along with this idea of like Sutek's plan, one thing that I really liked was the idea of like the 3 specials leading into this series and it all being connected. And it felt like
gods and magic.
Exactly. Yeah. And with that, there was the idea that the doctor himself caused this whole scenario because they were on the edge of existence and he used some kind of superstition. And that's what sort of like, right? That like brought the Neil Patrick Harris was the game master, right? Or what was his name?
The game master.
Okay. So like, you know,
that's toy maker, toy master, toy maker, something.
Toy maker. Okay. So he's got him, and then you know you have the maestro, right? And then I think there was one more too, right?
Well, there's an interesting part where Harbinger she checks a lot of people from Who history. She talks about the Trickster, who was the main villain from the Sarah Jane Adventures, which was a spinoff of Doctor Who. She talks about the Mara, who was a villain from early Doctor Who. So they kind of name check a lot of gods and stuff. But I don't know if this is where you were going to say Sutek being involved has nothing to do with what happened in the Wild Blue Yonder episode.
Right.
But they made it like he was. They were like, "Oh, the one who waits."
Right.
But he's been waiting. He's been waiting apparently for years and years. And the reason he came to life has nothing to do with magic or power or anything the Doctor did. It has to do with the ridiculous story around the mother.
Right, exactly. And so that in itself is really confusing because like when you have these stories where the villain has just been like waiting to strike, to have their moment, you always think, okay, well, why didn't they strike at this point? Why didn't they strike at that point? And so then he finally does strike, and it has something to do with Ruby Sunday, but I have no fucking clue what that is. Do you?
I know what the show says, but it doesn't make sense. It's supposed to be that Sutek can see everything as the Lord of Death or God of Death. He can see everything. But for some reason, he couldn't see he couldn't see Ruby Sunday's mother. And he became obsessed with the question of who's Ruby Sunday's mother, the way the audience was obsessed with that question.
Okay.
Except it makes no sense.
Yeah.
First of all, that happening makes no sense, right? But also it makes no sense that she's not anyone special.
Right.
And I feel like I'm talking about Rey and Star Wars at this point.
It is.
But I like that in Star Wars. I like The Last Jedi, and I like when they say your parents are nobody. But in this case, if her mother's nobody, it doesn't make any sense. Like at one point, and again, this is rhetorical bullshit. It's just hand-waving bullshit. Yeah. They say, well, if my mother's a normal person, then why could Sutek not see her? And the Doctor's like, well, because we thought of her as important, so that made her important, and that's how things become important. And it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
That means nothing. What you just said means nothing.
Right. And then like when it's the first episode, right? It's the church on Ruby Road, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in that episode, doesn't it start out where the Doctor goes, he's brought to that moment, and he like sees the mom drop off the kid, and the mom points like that. I think.
Yeah.
Right? And then
well, I don't know if she points at that point. I don't remember. She is dressed like a Jedi, which is how you dress
Right.
when you know a time traveler's watching you and you want to be mysterious.
Right. Right.
Like, oh, I gotta drop my kid off at a church. You better dress like a Jedi and point menacingly at a
Yeah.
sign because I like what the sign says. That's how I look at signs. I go,
Oh, Highland Boulevard. Oh.
stop.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. I mean, that just really fucking bothers me because, yeah, it's supposed to be that she's like this teenage girl dropping off this child. We're
Right.
jumping right ahead to the end here. She's dropping off this child, and she's dressed like she's like a fucking Red Riding Hood cosplay, right? But I guess not red.
I
And
love Red Robin, by the way. They're pretzel bites.
oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, they're never gonna fucking plug this show ever, but I appreciate the effort. But like, so Sutekh, this like the one who waits. Like, I guess I was just thinking that the one who waits is gonna be so incredibly powerful,
Right.
because they are like above the rest of these crazy powered beings.
Right. You thought that he was like the boss.
Yes.
He's not. The other gods just know of him.
Yeah. And he's just a fucking dog. I mean, I get it. He's like Anubis. He's like a jackal that's on the TARDIS. And the imagery of him on the TARDIS is cool when you look at it initially. But then that's it. That's it.
That's all it does. Yeah.
And then when he's fucking dragged through the time vortex, it looks goofy as hell. It looks like fucking Scooby-Doo, like one of those live action Scooby-Doo movies, you know?
Yeah.
So I mean, like let's talk though about like some other stuff besides Sutekh and all this shit for a second. Let's talk about like the side stuff. So we got Mrs. Flood. I saw a lot of stuff about her too on the internet.
Right. We still don't know anything about her, but given the ending, I think that's the setup for next season.
Yeah,
or Christmas. I don't know what's going to come first.
Yeah, I mean, because like, you know, we're sort of complaining a lot about this episode, and I think rightfully so. But it's still like a really great show to like look at, and the music is great, the acting is great, everything's great. It's just there's these like loopholes, and there's this one sequence where she goes to like check in on Ruby's grandmother, and she's kind of like looking down at the camera, and she's like this eerily lit shot, like almost looks like it's from like a, I don't know, like a black and white horror movie.
Yeah.
I actually really like that, you know?
Yes, I did too. And it's interesting that Miss Flood, she's Deadpool because she can look into the camera and talk directly to us.
Yes.
I wonder what that's gonna be. I can't imagine who she is, but I tell you who she's probably not.
Go ahead.
She's not Clara, the 12th Doctor's companion.
Okay.
Which is what people think she is online.
Yeah.
It's never the fan cast. It's never, oh, you know who that probably is. It never turns out that way.
Right.
The one who waits was not his granddaughter Susan, even though they set it up perfectly.
Right. Okay. So then that brings up, because dude, sometimes I just love hearing you talk. Do you think that at this point creatives are so obsessed with subverting the audience's expectations that they damage their own stories?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if it's epidemic, but I do think it is possible. It does, but it's funny because it does piss people off.
Yeah,
it makes people unhappy.
Yeah,
which is interesting because I think the texts that you like do more than just like tickle you, right? I think like even getting confused or upset or whatever, I think is part of something, right? Like look at like a David Lynch movie, right? Like you're supposed to not understand it, right?
Right.
And there's no answers for it. So that's interesting. That's an interesting question to think about.
Yeah, I do think that, you know, if you look at the evolution of entertainment, right, that like in the 80s and 70s, 80s, 90s, there's no internet. There's not this online speculation. There is speculation from people, but they're at conventions.
And
they're talking to their families. Yeah, there is that, but it's not on this fucking like everyday level where they're like, oh, this person's wearing these shoes, so that means they're this character, you know, or like they just cast this person, so that means this one's going to be in the next movie. Like that is something that you get updates from on a daily basis. And I think that like
that's what they're fighting against.
right. Like creators get excited about like the stories that they can tell, but then I think that like they start to think, well, people are already predicting how this is going to go, so I need to do something different. And then I think the way that they kind of save face when the expectations don't get met is they try to make it like, oh, well, we were trying to tell this story. We were trying to tell a story about family, or we were trying to tell a story about loss or something like that. Whereas like fans, it's I don't want to say it's like a math equation, but it's kind of like you're watching something unfold. You're like, okay, so A happened, then B happened. So in my mind, based on what I've watched, C is going to happen.
Right. I mean, you're always, when you're reading a text, right? We read all media, not just words, right? When you're reading a show or a movie or whatever, you're playing along. But so I don't know. I don't know if I can fault the creators, because I think it becomes another ownership thing, like we were talking about before. Like people get mad because it's not the thing that they wrote in their head, and then they're like, "This is stupid."
Yeah. On this channel, we always use this wrestling term. We got it from Danny, but it's fantasy booking, where like fans kind of predict what's going to happen with the wrestler, and they kind of predict who they're going to fight. And we do that like crazy on this channel, where we try to like predict what's going to happen.
Right.
I
but
think
you
that
can't become obsessed with it. You can't believe that wholeheartedly. Like you can't go, oh no, this is definitely going to be that, and if it's not, I'm mad.
Yeah, but see, and you know what's so funny is that we're barely talking about the episodes, but I think that's okay. Like, I think that one other problem besides there being the internet and that sort of rapid fan attention, one other problem is that everything is a fucking continuation of something or a remake. So you have like the source to draw from to be like, oh, he's got a green cape and he's got an armored arm. Oh, that must be Doctor Doom that they're going to show, right? Whereas if it's something like Breaking Bad or I can't think of another example off the top of my head, but like where it's like an original story that you don't know what's going to happen, you could speculate, but like it's not that level of like, oh, I know who this is, or they're probably going to do this,
right?
You know,
yeah.
I don't know, man. Let's go into like Empire of Death and the final episode. So in this episode, Sutekh, he enacts his plan in you see him at the end of the second to last episode. Then in this episode, Harriet Arbinger, like she changes, she looks like demonic and she blows sand on everyone and everyone dies. Susan Triad does the same exact thing. Basically, like all the planets the Doctor's ever visited get dusted.
Which is a very interesting idea. And I thought, and I'm not somebody who says there's got to be fan service, but I thought, what an interesting opportunity for fan service. I mean, we could literally go back to any episode of Doctor Who after that, but we don't really. Like,
no.
He says that it's everywhere he went in time and space, but we don't really see that. We see some random planet that we've never even seen before.
Right.
And we have this very overly long scene, which I think that they think is meaningful, but it's not really that meaningful to us. And it has the actress in it from Fleabag, the sister from Fleabag.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I loved her on Fleabag.
Yeah, she's great. And it goes on way too long. It just, you know, there's too many, maybe there's too many big ideas.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, I found it's weird. I don't know. And sometimes I was like, maybe this needed to be 3 episodes. But then there were other times where I was like, no, this should have been 1 episode.
Right.
Because the time window thing, and I watched both of these shows twice. The time window thing, especially the second time I watched, goes on way too long. It's like they're stretching that.
Yeah, that was a weird sequence. And I mean, so that's the second to last episode. I did think that when like Sutekh sort of emerged in like the sand or like the shadow and he was like talking.
Yeah.
That was very ominous and scary. I liked how that was done. And actually what I really liked was the unit guy like describing what he was experiencing. That was very creepy. I like that a lot. And then the TARDIS kind of made a weird noise before Sutekh showed up, and I like that sound design.
Yeah.
There's definitely this like real sense of tension, and then all of a sudden this like CGI dog showed up, and I'm like, oh, that's not like, it looked cool initially, but like I just felt like it was kind of goofy,
Yeah.
and it's weird because he looks like in the Tom Baker Doctor Who, he essentially just kind of looks like a pharaoh, but like he doesn't really have a face. He has like a mask.
Yeah.
Did you watch that by any chance?
I think I have seen that one.
Yeah. And one thing I love too when they're in that memory TARDIS is that, they're watching that episode essentially of Doctor Who. And then, Ruby says, "What's up with the Egyptian stuff?" And then the doc says cultural appropriation. And I feel like that's just like a wink to the camera. But like, besides that, like, I mean, do you think contextually that means anything? Like, or is it just literally just a wink at the camera?
I think it's a wink at the camera. And I think there's another wink, which at first I thought, oh, is this meaningful? And it isn't, which is the doctor says that the TARDIS has a sort of radius around it of I guess like a perception filter, and it's 73 yards. And I was like, oh, is this gonna explain that? But it doesn't. It's just a reference to it.
Right. And see, there's a couple of references to that episode.
Yes.
And including that Roger App Gwillim's database. So, okay. So, Mike, once again, this is another thing I was confused about, too. So, it's like the idea is that Sutekh just really wants to know who Ruby's mother is.
Yes.
And then the doctor, unit, no one on fucking Earth can figure out like that this woman gave her kid up for adoption over here, but this guy has a database that has the mom's DNA and Ruby's DNA, and that's essentially how they figure it all out.
Yeah, it's a weird, it doesn't quite work, right? Because we see Mad Jack and you think, oh, is this going to tie into that episode? But really it doesn't. It just reminds the doctor of that time period where he says in the future, I guess the 2040s or whatever, it became required that every single citizen has to do a DNA sample. So he's like, oh, if we go into the future while that happened, then we can find your mother that way. So,
right.
Okay. I guess. Okay, sure.
Yeah. How did they
I'm sorry.
No. I was going to say, like, how did they even make that connection to go to the future? I don't even fucking remember.
Because the doctor sees that the time period that it is, because that he would be later in time. The Mad Jack character.
Okay.
Which I guess this is a different universe from the one where Ruby stopped him.
Yeah. Right. Because he doesn't become the prime minister. That's right. That is interesting unto itself. I mean, it's like you said with your metaphor before with like the TV and having these big ideas. The big ideas are fun to think about, but then when you put it all together, it doesn't work exactly.
Well, it's like you're meant to squint at it.
Yeah. Oh man, I had it's so funny, Mike, because you're on my channel for 2 times in a row now. We did the Acolyte, we did this, and we're sounding kind of negative. We're complaining about a lot of things. We were complaining in the Acolyte, and then the last time that we were gushing was over Masters of the Universe 1987. So, like, what does that say?
Well, you know what? I think we were gushing over, or at least I was gushing over a lot of the middle episodes of this season. I really liked 73 Yards. I really liked Rogue. I really liked, I forget what it's called, the one with the landmine.
I think it's called Boom.
Yeah, I still think, despite its ending, this has been a very strong season of Doctor Who, a really strong sort of debut of a new Doctor. And I in general, I liked it all. There's no, I mean, like, I don't like the Beatles episode really, the Maestro episode, but there's none of them that I really, really hated. Even these last 2 are disappointing to me, but they're okay. You know what I mean? They're not the worst thing I've ever seen. I mean, they're not an episode of The Acolyte.
Oh, you beat me to the joke. you like pause there. I'm like, okay, I'm going to insert it, but I didn't. Got it. Okay, perfect. So let's kind of like tie it all together then with the very end. Okay, so with the very end, Ruby is reunited with her mother,
which
And
I liked, by the way. I like that stuff. I don't like that the who the mother is or why it makes no sense, but I like when she goes and meets her mother. I found that scene emotional and compelling because, again, like I've said before, I really like the Ruby character. And when the Ruby says goodbye to the doctor, I like that. That was an emotional scene, and it was emotional for me because we're gonna get a new companion next season, and I really liked Ruby. We barely knew Yi. She
yes,
only had these 8 or 9 episodes. So I all of that was, I think, even though it wasn't satisfying to learn the mystery of who the mother was,
yeah,
Ruby achieving her goal of finding her mother and meeting her mother with the help of the doctor, I think, was satisfying dramatically for her character.
yes. And you're a better judge of this, or would know more than I do about this. But like, I feel like from what I've seen of Doctor Who, the majority of the times, like 7 out of 10 times, when they separate from a companion, it's like something negative happens, like the person dies, or like something weird happens to them. They get locked in
That's a
another
big thing,
dimension.
yeah.
This was a pretty positive one. Are there other examples of like positive times they separate from companions?
There's been so many companions.
Yeah.
Positive. I'm sure there has, and people watching this are going to be like, "But what about this one?"
Yeah.
I mean, Martha wasn't that terrible of one. She kind of left him, actually. So it's
Okay.
similar to this. So
Okay.
that wasn't too bad.
Mhm.
A lot of the others were like they get stuck somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be, but yeah.
And one thing I find too is that some of the ones that are like fan favorites that get kind of done dirty, they like then bring them back and sort of
Yeah.
redeem themselves, right? Like, because Rose was essentially like stuck in another universe with Cybermen, and like she was cut off from the Doctor. I really love that's actually what got me like truly hooked on Doctor Who was that moment when Rose and the Doctor got separated like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole sequence was so well done with David Tennant and Billy Piper. I was like, oh, this show, this is not like what I'm used to.
Right.
But then, like a version of him gets with Rose, right? That's kind of positive.
Yeah.
Then there's the stuff with Donna Noble where like she can't remember the Doctor, but then essentially they've like fixed that too,
Yeah.
So I think from what I've heard that Ruby is actually going to come back next season too. Like they filmed stuff with her too.
Yeah, she just won't be the main person.
Yeah.
I'd like Ruby a lot though.
Mhm.
And I feel like it's interesting if you look at every era of the Doctor. Often the Doctor does have multiple companions.
Yeah.
But they have one companion that's considered like their companion.
Yeah.
Like David Tennant and Rose, right? Martha is not the iconic companion with him, and Donna, as much as she is loved, she isn't. And the 11th Doctor and Amy Pond.
Right.
He also was with Clara, but Amy Pond is that companion. So there's always like the prime companion. Clara becomes the prime companion for the 12th Doctor.
Yeah.
But then he had another companion, Bill. So I wonder, we've only had this one season, and it's at least 2 episodes shorter than a lot of the other seasons. It's a very short season, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, who the next companion. I know they've chosen the actor. If we will feel, that same way, or if we're always going to go, oh well, it's really always Ruby with
Ruby.
yeah,
right. With 15.
yeah.
I think that the companion is that soldier, right? From like her, I mean, it's not that character, but it's the actress that played Mundy on Boom, right?
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
I think that's what it is. I might be wrong. But okay. Well, unless you had other things you wanted to say, I was going to ask you like one last question about this. What would you say was your favorite part of this series? Your favorite part?
The whole
fucking. I wouldn't count the 3 specials with David Tennant, but like the Christmas special to now.
Well, that's difficult because I do think it's a very strong season. I really like Shurigawa, and
Mhm.
I like that he is this totally different direction from the other doctors.
Yes.
And he's happy and he's emotional and you know it still works. You know, when the Doctor was rebooted in 2005, he was very like, I think is a way to make it more like gritty or whatever. He was very like maudlin and had all these demons. I mean, there's a moment in the 7th episode where the Doctor's talking to Kate because Kate didn't know that he had a granddaughter, and uh he says like, I was a different doctor back then, all mysterious. I'm still trying to shake that off. So,
Hmm.
so he feels like even the 15th Doctor sees himself as different from the other doctors. And
Mm.
you would have thought that that didn't work, but it works. It works.
Mhm.
I think he's such a good doctor.
Right.
And like I said before, I love Ruby. I think Ruby's a very fun, interesting character to watch.
Yeah, yeah, I love him. Yeah, so many people just complain. I think like, oh, because he's a gay man and that like he, acts gay on the show, and he's a black man. All these things that like people just they just go to right away because they're racist and homophobic. But like he's like super charismatic, a lot of fun. I've enjoyed.
Apparently, and I'm a heterosexual cisgendered guy, but apparently he's hot. I was out with my girlfriend and her friend Kelly, and somehow Doctor Who came up, and I was like, yeah, he's great, great. And then Kelly was like, and he's so fucking hot, right? And then my girlfriend was like, yeah, he really is. And they were just talking about how hot he's like the hottest doctor there's ever been. And I was like, well, that went over my head. I didn't catch that, but that's cool.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. They need that kind of energy again, I think, to get the show going because that
Right.
was like I think people thought David Tennant was attractive, but I think Matt Smith was definitely like the good-looking, attractive doctor that people were into. Which is so strange to me because I think Matt Smith is like very unique looking and
Yeah.
but whatever. I had one last thing I wanted to bring up because that was my last question, but then I was like, oh wait, I got to talk about this too. It's interesting to me that there's no like cliche typical Doctor villains in this season that you always see. There's no Daleks, there's no Cybermen, there's no the Master,
Yes. I found it refreshing. I mean, we do have old villains, right? Sutek's an old villain,
right.
but I found it refreshing. I don't think, it feels like for a long time there was an edict that you have to have a Dalek episode.
Right.
He's not the Doctor unless he faces the Daleks. And I think, look, when the episode comes, right, I will find it interesting. But I'm kind of glad that we didn't. It's a very unique little season.
Yes,
And
yes.
Going back to your question of something that you liked from this season, I wanted to say I like the choice to not have him have a costume and have him be like a fashionista who changes his costume every single episode.
Yeah.
Because it gives you like something to think about. Like I liked in these last 2 episodes, he's wearing jeans and a white t-shirt and a black leather jacket. It's a very cool classic look, and he pulls it off.
Hell yeah. I think we said this in our last review, but the one consistency has been his rings on his hand.
Yes.
And I think that's different from all the other doctors. Yeah, but he is definitely cool and hip. And like regardless of the ratings or anything like that, I hope that it's full steam ahead and we get more of this doctor, like multiple seasons with this doctor, because I'm all on board. And I don't know if I've mentioned this in any of our reviews, but like in the time that you and I have started talking about Doctor Who, it was like you couldn't find classic Who anywhere streaming. Mm-hmm. And then you could find all of like from Christopher Eccleston to Jodie Whittaker on Max. And now the only thing that you can find streaming is just this season and the specials.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Because I mean, I love talking about this with you, and I just want to go watch like more of the Peter Capaldi and watch the Jodie Whittaker stuff. Yeah. And I can't. I have to get some kind of fucking British streaming service.
Interesting. Yeah. Disney's got to snatch that up.
Yeah. No kidding. They got us by the balls. Yeah.
I had a question for you, and it's kind of a big question. Mm-hmm. But as I was watching this and feeling disappointed, I asked myself, do we need finales? Like, the idea of a big finale is a fairly new idea. Like, you go back to like classic TV shows, like what was the finale of The Honeymooners? There wasn't. It just had an episode and that was the last one. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's a fairly new idea in television. And, with Doctor Who, at least, it's gotten to and think about how often you're disappointed by finales, right? People were disappointed by the Seinfeld finale. People were disappointed by the Dexter finale. People were disappointed by the finale to The Sopranos. So often it's like a feat that's almost impossible to do. And those are series finales, but in a sort of microcosmic way, the same thing's true for season finales. And part of me thought, like, what if this were just a good episode? What if it were just, this is the last episode of this season, it's just a good episode? Why would that be so bad? Because Doctor Who has gotten into a rut of, you have the first episode of the season and somebody whispers something like, oh, there's a thing coming or whatever, right? And then that gets talked about a little. There's little Easter eggs of that until the final episode where it either comes out and you're satisfied or you're not. And that's the big, big thing. And then next season it happens again. Like, why do we need that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a really, really great question. And I think it's, once again, it's like the evolution of entertainment, right? Because really with like shows like Buffy and then like, I don't know, like Lost and stuff. I mean, like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Babylon 5, X-Files, you start to have these like ongoing stories.
Yeah.
Buffy and the X-Files are kind of probably the first, and maybe Twin Peaks too, of the idea of like the overarching plot for the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that big story. And then there's those individual episodes, Monster of the Week episodes for Buffy or X-Files. And Doctor Who, I think, kind of fits into the same thing. Supernatural was like that as well. And it's just the idea that there's this like overarching storyline to get people interested in throughout the whole season.
Yeah.
But then there's those individual episodes. But I do think that there is some merit and stuff to the smaller story arcs or like the one episode stories versus the finales too, right? Or like these overarching things. Because like, we just talked about how there wasn't any like main Doctor Who villains in the season.
Yeah.
And there's all new ones. And like, that's what comics used to be. It used to be just like, here's a new villain. Here's a new villain. Like they used to just like pop out new villains, new heroes left and right just to make a new interesting story.
Uh-huh.
What about Sandman? Or, well, he'll fight the Scorpion.
Right.
And like these characters have like just become part of this whole universe. But like having these standalone interesting stories, that's sort of lost because everyone's thinking about these overarching things. And I mean, the overarching things have to come to an end,
And when you think about like when people talk about their favorite Doctor Who episodes, it's never a finale, right? It's always like, oh, well, the one where he steps on the landmine, or the one where they're, like any of these little, because Doctor Who is about stories, right? I mean, science fiction is a genre that's very much writerly and focused on stories. Like science fiction are really the only series where they'll tell you the title of the episode. So it's like, this is a story. And, no one's like, oh, my favorite Doctor Who. Oh, it was the finale of this season where a bunch of shit happened. And because they're always messy. That's the thing. They always turn out like this. This is not the first Doctor Who finale that's been this way.
No way.
It's messy. They try to do too much. Like, I think it would be a wonderful change of pace to not do it.
Oh, dude, I'd be all for that. I'd be all for that of any show, honestly, where there's not that overarching thing, but it's just individual stories, and for comics too. But for comics, on the contingent that they're introducing new characters in that way, like even like just to kind of wrap it back up to comics and stuff. Like think about like Batman the Animated Series, phenomenal fucking show. But there isn't this like overarching thing for a season. It's just like, here's the Joker episode. Here's the Riddler episode,
Right.
Like I kind of do miss those days.
Yeah, I agree. I I want them to try something different. I can't. I don't want to sit through another one of these finales.
Oh man. Well, when is the show coming back? Do you know?
I have no idea. I think it's
Okay.
going to be quite a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the very least, we know by Christmas we'll have something, right? Because there was like a
Right,
Christmas
and I know
special.
they've been filming stuff, so it's probably not going to be that long.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Cool. Well, dude, as always, it's been a pleasure. I kind of like when we kind of veer off topic, but we're talking about like bigger picture things. So I'll have to come up with a reason to have you on the show again. But like, you guys should always go and check out Pop Culture Man Children. Mike has really got something special there, and he's got a lot of interesting guests too. And the topics, I actually really appreciate the topics he comes up with too. So I don't have a cool go bye thing to say like Mike does at the end of Pop Culture Man Children. So Mike, do you want to just awkwardly say goodbye with me?
Goodbye. Thank you for watching us cover this season of Doctor Who. We made a lot of friends along the way.
Yeah.
And we're all going to miss Ruby Sunday.
Yes.
And, thanks a lot, everybody.
Nice. That was just about as awkward as I usually make it. So I appreciate it.